hub,
and spoke. Audio Collective.
You're listening to Nocturne. I'm Vanessa Lowe. As winter fades into memory on the Northern Hemisphere, many breathe sighs of relief, looking forward to longer days and the warmth of the sun inviting time spent outside. But some are not so excited, hanging on to the wisps of winter with its long, cold nights.
My late grandfather on my father's side was a very avid downhill skier, and he was just about as fanatical about downhill skiing as I am about cross-country skiing. I learned to cross-country ski when I was 2. That was a real connection that we had, and even though he died many years ago, every time I cross-country ski when it's very, very cold, where every time you inhale, ice crystals form on your nose hairs, and your eyelashes get covered in ice crystals, I always think of him because no temperature daunted him. And he would always bring a silk balaclava that he would wear when he would downhill ski in the coldest temperatures. And when he got to a point in his life when he wasn't really skiing anymore, he gave me this balaclava. And it's made in Norway, and it's 100% silk. And it is always in my pocket when I ski, no matter the temperature. And I've worn it many, many times when it's been extremely cold and absolutely no one I know is out skiing. I am the only one hitting the trails. And I wear this balaclava and I go out skiing and the snow is extra squeaky and I think of my grandfather. My name is Laura Narenberg and I live in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. I am a violinist, an improvisation teacher, and a very avid cross-country skier. So I am definitely known as the most ski fanatical of everyone in my immediate family. The image that many people have in mind when they think of a cross-country skier is a very regular activity of swish, 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 kind of like a tempo. You could set a metronome. And there is some of that. And at the same time, my favorite kind of skiing is a kind of skiing that gives me challenges all the time. So that it's always a little up and down and there's a little climbing. And sometimes the climbing is steep enough that you have to get out of the traced trail, the groomed trail, and make a herringbone, a V with your skis and climb up like duck feet. And I tend to run up hills and sort of work really hard to get over the top of a hill as quickly as possible. But I love the challenge of being out in winter and exerting myself and creating that internal heat to warm myself through the act of cross-country skiing. And then I also love going down the hills, which has its own challenges. The descent, because it's always changing, the terrain is always changing, it does something to my brain because I'm constantly having to adapt. It gets me out of my own ruminations. I need the challenge of the varying terrain. It helps me physically, but also I'm sure it helps me mentally.
That help can be extra welcome in Canada in the winter.
Where I live in Ottawa, in the winter, in the dead of winter, the sun sets around 4:30 and it rises close to 7:30 in the morning. So that makes for some really long nights. You know, when my students come for their violin lessons, it's dark out. When my kid gets home from school, it's dark out. So those opportunities to ski in the daytime are pretty short. And although I do mostly ski during the day, it has meant that for many of us, we ski at night as well. And some years we do more night skis and others we do fewer, but it's definitely a pretty important part of cross-country skiing culture where I live. So Gatineau Park, where I ski, is interesting. The park rides up an escarpment. And so there are these big cliffs that overlook part of the city. So there is some city glow that reaches it, but the topography itself is extremely hilly. So you can go over a couple hills and then it's just much darker, and it's very treed. It's a mixture of deciduous trees and coniferous trees. So there's a lot of spruce, but there's also a lot of birch and maple. So obviously the deciduous trees, because they have no leaves, they let a lot of light through, even right in the forest. But there are these huge boulders everywhere called erratics that were left by a glacier receding millions of years ago. And they're everywhere in the park, and they also block the light. So it's this really strange landscape that changes constantly. There are so many different trails, and all of them are so different from one another. And even within one park, you can have all these different microclimates. In fact, the park itself, because of its location on top of this escarpment, sometimes it will be raining in Ottawa, down below in the valley, and snowing in Gatineau Park. So this sort of use of the park at night, I'm not sure it's 100% official. I think that it's just something people have done because the days are so short and so many people are working 9 to 5. And so the only time they'd be able to ski on a weekday would be in the dark.
Whether or not it's official, a quick Google search reveals that Gatineau Park is by far the most popular destination near Ottawa for night skiing, with ambient city light or moonlight creating more than enough visibility on the wider roads turned ski trails that most people stick to in the dark.
One of the things about skiing at night is you'd expect to have to use a headlamp. And I do use the headlamp, but it's really mostly useful for being seen yourself, because most of the snow is reflecting what little light there is. So if it's a clear night and there's a moon out, well, you're set. You definitely don't need the headlamp. You'll see really well, and you'll probably be seen quite well. And then if it's overcast, because the city's not too far away, depending how far south you are in the park, how close to the city you are, you might get enough just glow from the city to illuminate your way. And I just want to mention that there are no artificial lights illuminating any of the trails. Like, no one has installed purposeful lighting. So even these trails that are roads in the summer, they have no summer lighting either. They are pitch black in the summer. One time, it was March break here, and we got the most enormous snowstorm. And that morning, we'd already decided as a family to go skiing, and we drove. It took us about an hour to get to the trailhead, but we were really determined. And because it was snowing and not too far from the city where we started from, every snowflake was catching all of the light emanating from the city, so that we didn't need our headlamps. And even though it was overcast, we couldn't see the moon, every snowflake and all the snow on the ground and all the snow on the trees was reflecting all of the light all around. And it was totally magical.
As with many leisure activities that people usually do in the day, Laura finds that skiing takes on a different quality in the dark.
There's something that happens when I ski at night. I have found that I don't get as concerned about how far I've gone. Maybe it's because I'm not seeing the same landmarks as I would during the day. I could just go and go, and you don't notice the kilometers, you don't notice the miles clicking by. And then before you know it, you've gone really far and you realize, oh gosh, I should really turn around. That's happened more than once. Whereas when I ski during the day, somehow I have a stronger perception of the distance I've traveled, and my body lets me know, hey, you've worked a lot. You should turn around and get back home and feed me. But when I ski at night, I feel like I could just go and go forever, and I never feel tired. I feel like I have endless energy. I get this second wind or third wind at night, and I've warmed my body, and the stars are beautiful, and the snow is supporting me, and I'm doing something really special. Being out on the ski trail at night, I feel like I've done something hard, and that also feels easy at the same time. And I love that about night skiing. When I ski during the day, I'm very much pulled in two directions. I'm pulled into my inner world of exertion, and I'm also pulled outward because the environment is so beautiful. Every time you turn your head, you see something in a different way, even if it's a trail that you've skied 50 times, because the snow will always drift a little differently, and some trees will come down and birds will make holes in trees. But when I ski at night, what I see is limited. So if it's a clear sky, well, suddenly my eyes are pulled upwards and I'll be stopping or even skiing and looking up, and it's very awkward, and I'm sure I don't look elegant at all. But I love seeing the moon, and I try to spot some constellations. Orion is usually there. It's often really present in the winter. And then during the day, I don't really notice how loud my skis are until I want to stop and hear a woodpecker. But at night, it feels much louder. I guess that's because there's not as much to see. It's just dark in front of me, and it's dark on either side, so I'm not noticing, a beautiful snowdrift or a beautiful bird or a beautiful tree, but I'm noticing the sound. And I've started to notice that different temperatures and different types of snow make such different sounds. If it's really cold, it's going to squeak. And if it has thawed and refrozen, you might get kind of a hard scraped sound, which is very loud. And my favorite, of course, is when I'm skiing and the snow is fresh but not sticky, because then it's very muffled and it's like you're skiing through clouds, although obviously that's not what clouds are like, but it's what I imagine it would feel like to ski through clouds. Everything is muted, and there's something so calming about that. It's almost like, this is going to sound very silly, but I have such romantic feelings about nature and about my experience in nature in the winter, but it's almost like Mother Nature is just saying, there, it's okay. You're out in nature and I'm going to take care of you. I've gotten some of my best thinking done when I ski at night. All of the problems and the dilemmas and the challenges and the interpersonal conflicts that I ruminate on during the day or in the car, I find when I'm skiing, any challenges become less severe. Things feel less daunting, more manageable.
While many night skis have this quiet internal quality, they also sometimes take on another, less contemplative dimension.
Sometimes I've used night skis just as a way to chat with a friend that I don't see very often. Like, we'll just get together for a night ski and we won't see the kilometers clicking by, and it will be a nice way to have a chat. I mean, some people do it really for fitness, but others do it almost as much for the social aspect as the fitness aspect when we ski at night. Generally at night, I don't ski on the very narrow backwoods trails that aren't groomed because it's foolhardy enough to go during the day, which I do love to do. I enjoy that very much. But at night, we'll go on the wider trails. And sometimes it's even a party atmosphere on the trail. Like, everyone is kind of giddy skiing around you.
There are also several day-use cabins in the park, the closest one being about a 2.5-mile ski.
Maybe 45 minutes. The first 2 kilometers, the first a little over a mile, is uphill. Not straight uphill, but kind of, you're working. And then the next couple kilometers, the next a little over a mile, is a little gentler climb and flat. And then before you know it, you're at the cabin. These are cabins that all they have is a wood stove and tables inside. They're not meant for people to sleep in. So there are no beds. And it's totally first come, first serve. So you go in and you have no choice but to meet everyone. And there's a limited amount of seating. So people are kind of squished around the table if there are a lot of people. So you get to one of the cabins and it's as if there are about 6 parties going on at the same time. People bring wine. Sometimes people bring chocolate fondue kits and they're eating chocolate fondue. People have brought birthday cakes in their backpacks. I usually bring cheese sandwiches and I wrap them in foil and there's always a wood stove. So we put our cheese sandwich on the wood stove, flip it, and then you get like a homemade grilled cheese in your tin foil. When we go to one of the day-use cabins at night, the first thing I notice is the smell of wood smoke. Because if the wind is blowing the right way, you'll smell the wood smoke from the wood stove from really far away. The next thing I notice is the sound. I will usually hear the cabin before I see it, because many of the cabins are behind a hill or just around the bend, so you don't necessarily see them. At night, there seems to be much more of a party atmosphere than during the day, in part because during the day, there are a lot of families. And at night, it's really a party atmosphere and people are joking and often they're enjoying some wine. You hear as much French as English because the region is bilingual, English and French. And in fact, you might even hear a little more French than English because Gatineau Park is in Quebec. And so you'll hear these big guffaws and people laughing. Everyone is in a really great mood. And the only reason it doesn't sound like an actual club is that there's no music, because there's no electricity in the cabins and no one brings, as far as I know, no one brings music players, although I suspect that somebody has and I just wasn't there. So you hear all this laughter and real party sounds, and then you see a glow. Because all of the cabins have lots of windows. And in front of each window inside the cabin, built into the windowsill, is a small candle holder. And I'm not even sure if people just bring their own candles or if the park provides them, because the wax that is melted around that candle holder is decades old for sure. But so you see the glow from the candles, and then further in, it's all fogged up because of all the humidity of all the bodies inside. So you can sort of see people moving, but it's very vague. You can't really make out anything distinct other than this beautiful golden, warm glow. So you smell the smoke and you hear the partying and you see the warm glow. And then inevitably someone opens or shuts one of the cabin doors and they all slam. Every single one slams. And so all of that revelry, it will suddenly get really loud as someone opens his door, and then it will crash. The door will slam shut as someone is leaving the cabin. And so you kind of know that you're in for a party. It's not a time to go reflect. It's a time to go have fun. So I've been in many of the cabins alone during the day. And there's something a little off-putting, in part because usually there's no fire. So it's more that it's cold. But at night, it is so incredibly dark in that cabin when there's nobody else there and there's no candle and there's no fire. And there just is no light being produced. And even if the moon is out, or if you're getting some ambient light from the snow and anything that's reflecting outside, none of that is happening inside, and very little of it is getting in through the windows. Maybe a little moonlight would get in, but it just feels shadowed and dark. I can't imagine anything would be dangerous there. Probably the only animal that would get in would be a mouse, and it's not going to do anything except just startle you. But one time, my husband and I, our anniversary is toward the end of March, and we thought it would be a great idea to go to a cabin. So we got a babysitter and we set out. And I think the first indication that this wasn't a good idea was the fact that the parking lot was empty And as we climbed this hill, we realized that the conditions of the snow were really hard. And when the snow is hard, it just means that there's been a bit of a thaw and then a refreeze, and that's happened a few times. So it was quite cold, and there was lots of snow coverage, but the conditions of the trail weren't very pleasant. We did make it to the cabin, though, and there was no smoke and no glow and no sound when we got there, and it was very scary. But by then, we really needed to eat. We were hungry because we had brought our dinner along with us, and the cabin was completely dark. It would have taken too long for us to start a fire enough to be able to heat up our sandwiches, so we ate cold sandwiches, so cold bread and cold cheese and cold vegetable sticks and cold bottles of water. And we just ate really fast and looked around and felt very alone, just totally alone in the world. We saw no one else. And when we got out of the cabin and left the cabin, we turned towards the woods as we went to retrieve our skis and saw these two glowing eyes staring at us. Our headlamp illuminated the eyes, but didn't illuminate anything else. To this day, I don't know what that was. I don't know if it was a raccoon. Maybe it was a porcupine. Maybe it was a fox. Maybe it was a coyote or a wolf. I have no idea. But it was a steady gaze, and it was not a tiny animal. And it was not a deer either, because there are lots of deer in the park. I've seen deer many times. Obviously, it was some animal. And I don't think I've ever put my skis on faster. I did not wait to find out what animal that was. And I just put my skis on so fast, and my heart was beating a mile a minute, and we just booted it out of there. I've never been so grateful that most of the trail back to the car is downhill than that particular ski.
While Laura does sometimes ski with other people on the trails, there's something special about being out there on her own.
So I ski almost always alone in the park. I like the feeling of being by myself when I ski, and I like the feeling of doing things alone at night. When I ski by myself, I'm only answerable to myself, and I'm not making anyone feel bad for deciding to do a shorter ski or deciding to add a few kilometers or taking a last-minute detour.
Of course, cross-country skiing alone at night has its own particular set of risks.
I'm grateful that I'm going to knock wood right now, that I have yet to fall and hurt myself skiing at night, because I definitely have during the day. It could have to do with the fact that I tend to go on easier trails when I ski at night, because I want to make sure that I make it back all right. I bring a small first aid kit, and I bring the emergency number for the park. So they have a local emergency number. I actually have it taped to my ski pole. And even though cell phone reception is spotty, it's pretty good most of the time. I also have a whistle that I ski with. And I'm fully aware that every time I ski by myself, I am risking hurting myself and making it really difficult for people to come and find me. So at night, I tend to ski on the better traveled trails, so wider trails that will be better lit by the moon or by the snow and will have more skiers on them. But I've definitely gotten back to the parking lot because I've gone out pretty late after violin teaching, and my car has been the only car in the parking lot when I've finished my ski. And to be honest, I'm slightly more nervous in the parking lot than on the ski trail. Something about being in ski boots and, fussing with my skis and my poles and getting them into my car and getting my car key out feels more vulnerable than skiing. I'm a really adept skier, and I can go pretty fast, and I'm quite agile on skis, but walking around in ski boots is not fun. There aren't really any big carnivores where we live that would attack a human. So what would worry me the most would be to fall and injure myself and then be out of cell phone reception, so that I would be unable to get myself back to the trailhead or to one of the cabins because Ottawa and Gatineau, where Gatineau Park is, they're cold places in the winter. It tends to stay below freezing. So that worries me more than anything, because the cold is the biggest danger when you're skiing at night. Because if you stop moving and you've been sweating, you can get chilled. Added to that is that since most of the trails start out going uphill, it means when you head back to your car, you'll be going downhill when you're really hot. And I've felt extremely chilled getting into my car. It's such a frequent occurrence for me. I try not to think about it too much and thank whoever there is to thank for the fact that my car has always opened and I've been able to get in. But because the temperature is going down and you tend to be a little bit damp from sweat, it's really easy to get very, very chilled toward the end of a ski. So getting injured and being stuck on the trail and getting cold, that is, for me, the biggest danger, 100%.
The risk of hypothermia aside, Laura has found that skiing through the night provides a pathway unlike any other into the beauty of the dark winter.
I don't like to walk in the winter at all. I hate it, actually. I find it treacherous and unpleasant, and you go slow. But there's something about being outdoors and exerting myself on skis, which seems to open up. It's almost like a portal. So every time the ski season ends for me, I go through a grieving process. And I don't know, some poet said that April is the cruelest month. I can't remember who that was. But for me, it's really true. While people around me are so excited for birds coming back and the light levels increasing and the weather getting warmer, I grieve the ski season every April. And I just feel so sad that that portal won't be available to me for another many, many months until we hit a big snowstorm in November or December, and then I can go skiing at night again.
You've been listening to Nocturne. I'm Vanessa Lowe. Nocturne is produced by me and was created by myself and Kent Sparling, who also composed the theme music. Nocturne is now 100% listener supported. Thank you if you help out on Patreon or PayPal. If you love the show and haven't contributed yet, please head over to nocturnepodcast.org/support, where you'll find links for how you can help keep us going. Or you can go directly to patreon.com/nocturnepodcast to become a regular supporter with access to bonus episodes and behind-the-scenes musings. Again, that's nocturnepodcast.org/support or patreon.com/nocturnepodcast. Nocturne is a proud member of Hub and Spoke Audio Collective, a group of smart, well-crafted, independent podcasts. Check out all the shows at hubspokeaudio.org. Till next time, be well, and thanks for listening.